Okay, we're live.
Hi. Hello, Sabrina Scott, my favorite witch of Toronto.
Am I the only witch you know here, though? Like, probably.
I'm gonna have to think about that, but I feel like I feel like I have other witch friends because why wouldn't I?
I'll take the props, though. I'm happy to be here. I wish I was in Florida with all the plants. It
But
looks so nice.
but do you though? Because then the allergies.
You know what? Like, I think I would probably be fine. Because, like, the plants here are different than in Florida.
There's a whole swamp witch movement down here that I feel like you could appreciate of these like male swamp witches that go into glades and do like spiritual practices in the Everglades with the snakes that live there. Like if you go on TikTok and Google like witch, you'll find these
Oh
swamp
my God. I
just
actually I don't even have TikTok, so
oh well then I need to send you my sign up for TikTok because we both get $60 when we do it if you use my
that's so ridiculous. I don't think I'm gonna sign up for TikTok. Sorry. Everyone wants me to, but I can't. I feel really old when I try to use TikTok. Like I just don't get it. It's like when I try to use Snapchat, it just doesn't compute.
You're not old at all. You're a young witch in the beginning of days.
Thank you. That's what I'll tell myself. Anyway, hi everyone.
My young witch friend Sabrina Scott, author of which critically acclaimed award-winning author of Witchbody, Rapeseed. There's more.
Person Cure, and then my new book is coming out this summer. My second graphic novel called Body Magic is coming out this summer.
Body Magic. It looks so
So
cool
excited.
of printing it. And she's also a PhD who's like, or a PhD, what do you call it? A PhD candidate?
Candidate. I'm like this close to being done. I have to write like 2,000 words. I'm just dragging my ass.
So I can refer to as my witch doctor friend.
Witch doctor is so true. It's so true. That should be my motivation, if anything, to be honest.
Witchcraft, which then you'll be a witch doctor.
Exactly. I'll be
But
very official. That's a great idea. That's gonna be the my wind in my sails. As I'm like inching towards the finish line. It's always that final stretch that's always the worst with
and
most things.
the PhD is on witchcraft, right? Or esoteric European traditions.
So it's specifically on witchcraft and trauma, and how, in my humble opinion, witchcraft can be a really great trauma healing modality.
I'm very excited to
Yeah.
read your final paper. I
Yeah,
feel like
we'll see.
I have to heal my past traumas.
Sorry, say that again. You cut out.
I feel like I've definitely used witchcraft to heal some of my past traumas. Like not the whole thing, but like
Mhm.
you know.
Absolutely. I think it's legit for so many reasons. And there is a lot of research out of Germany specifically on spiritual practices for healing of trauma. But that research is around practices by Buddhist monks. But in my opinion, it's like the spiritual practices, the grounding, the energy work, the breathing, like all of that stuff is more or less the same. So it would make sense to me that similar brain changes would be happening in these Buddhist monks who are meditating about whatever it happens to be, and then people who are actively engaged in witchcraft and intention and energy work. Like it seems to me like a lot of the same things are going on. So it would make sense. So I do think the science will eventually catch up to what I'm saying. We'll see.
But where I you've got me thinking right now because when I first moved to Toronto, I had very bad PTSD. Like looking back, my PTSD was on like full tilt. Like I had just had bad things happen to me in Cameroon and Uganda
Mhm.
for years, and the PTSD was very raw. And so I signed up for this trial at U of T that was Kundalini yoga for PTSD, but they were like doing medical, they were following it. Yeah, just so it was like this white lady in the white turban, and she was holding these classes every week, and I would walk there in the miserable cold snow and do this, but it was like re-traumatizing me. I was having a terrible time. Like I wasn't ready to drop into my body or be like
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to the Kundalini energy. My trauma energy was so strong.
Yeah.
It got me thinking, like, where does yoga end and witchcraft begin?
It's a
Like,
good question. It's a
how
good
do you
question.
define witchcraft?
What's that?
How do you even define witchcraft? Yeah, like,
Yeah, it's a good question. So, everyone that you ask is going to have a different answer to that question. But for me, magic and witchcraft specifically, so I would say witchcraft is a form of magic. I would say magic is this massive umbrella that we have lots of different types of practices. When I say witchcraft, usually what I'm referring to is that more kind of Western, specifically English inflection of things happening. And my cats are probably going to jump up. You can't talk to a witch without having at least one cat meowing from some direction. So oh, she wants to say hello.
I was
Um,
gonna I heard her turn
no.
of magic and was like, me too.
Whenever I talk about witchcraft, she's like, "Hello, let's go." She wants to steal the spotlight, which is totally fine by me. But there's so many different forms of magic, and some of them are going to be more Western styles. But Africa actually has its own whole many magical traditions that work in a really different way than Western styles of magic. And we can kind of break it down forever. Like there's so many different subsets. But when I say witchcraft, basically what I mean, sorry, cat. I'll just show you guys the cat.
Aw.
How sweet is that? Oh, with her little feet.
And meanwhile, my schnauzer is like lifeless on the chair. She doesn't care at all about our discussion.
Dead to the world. I love it. So for me, witchcraft, if I can just sum it up, like a lot of people have defined it as the act of changing consciousness at will.
Mm,
I see it as a collaborative experience. So there was interestingly a critique in the 50s and 60s where some people would say like there's no such thing as a witch alone. And so people were really against like solitary witches. They were like, you have to be in a coven or else you don't count, which is interesting. So the rise of solitary witchcraft happened in like the late 70s and the 80s specifically, which is interesting. But that idea of there cannot be a witch alone, like I agree with that, but not for the reasons that people originally said that. Like people originally were saying that because they believed that witchcraft outside of a coven in like 1950s England was totally BS. But I think that there's no such thing as a witch alone because we're surrounded by objects, the land, the ancestors, spirits. In my case right now, I am surrounded by cats. Like people work with candles, incense, whatever. Like I do consider objects to be in a way like a community that we can work with collaboratively in this fun thing called witchcraft. And so for me, ultimately, it is a very animist, collaborative energy work type of thing, but I'm sure not everyone sees it that way. Everyone's going to kind of come at it a little bit differently. But the consciousness changing thing for me is super crucial and part of why I think there's some interesting connections there in terms of the trauma healing piece. Because trauma, like it's often, as you obviously know, and I'm sure many people here listening already know as well from probably personal experience, like it just kind of takes you over when you're triggered by something and you don't really have control over what is going on in your body, the sensations, the feelings, the activations, the everything. You might say things that you don't want to say, you might freeze, all of these things you don't have control over. But what I love about witchcraft specifically is it is so much about agency and the reclamation of agency and the remembering of agency. As
mm,
which what's unique about witchcraft, at least in my opinion, in the Western tradition that I'm in, it is so uniquely about the expression of agency. And that's not the case for many spiritualities. It can be about worshiping God or, I don't know, calling upon rain for the community or working with the ancestors. Like, don't get me wrong, all of that stuff is important to many contemporary witches as well. And it's also very much about connecting with what is our agency and effectiveness and capability to create and instigate change in our own unique individual world, and then also the world collectively, writ large, our community, our country, whatever,
right.
all of that stuff. But in terms of the trauma stuff, I do think it's especially important for that control of our own environment, our own body, our own mind, learning how to calm ourselves, learning how to ground. All of those are ritual techniques.
Hmm.
really.
Yeah. What has been the like most inspiring, interesting, influential text that you've run across in this witchcraft PhD for you? If you had to like name, or maybe name a few.
Texts that are really good. It's tough because, like, a lot of the witchcraft texts that are written by practitioners are not my favorite, and a lot of the really good witchcraft stuff is written by historians.
Okay.
So, like, anything by Ronald Hutton is super good. He has this great book called Drawing Down the Moon. I think. No, Triumph of the Moon. Drawing Down the Moon is by Margot Adler, and it came out in the late 70s. But Ronald Hutton has some really interesting books as well as he's got one called The Witch, I think, and it's about witchcraft all around the world. So he does this interesting, like, global kind of comparative study of what has witchcraft looked like globally. So for me personally, some of the most interesting stuff has been that historical research more so than a lot of contemporary practice. I think some of the most interesting practice related stuff was happening in the 60s and 70s.
Wow. Was that in tandem with the New Thought movement? Like, is there a tie over? Because I'm kind of obsessed with the New Thought movement lately.
Yeah,
Like, I've really been reading it. I'm kind of like diving into like learning about like New Thought Maga, which I don't even hear people putting those three words together, but they need to be like,
it needs to be talked about. New
you know
Thought is
what?
super interesting. Yeah,
It's
New Thought is interesting. Let's talk about it. So New Thought, at least to my understanding, is much more of a like late 1800s to like 1880s, 1890s into like the 1910s, 1920s. Like anyone please correct me on that. But from what I know, that is like kind of the a really big moment when
and
it
then
was kind of like the rise of industry and all of that was kind of happening at the same time.
fed into New Age, which would have been like 60s, 70s in the beginning.
Yeah, what's
Right.
interesting is a lot of New Thought was very Christian.
Right.
And so it was also called the prosperity gospel. And so it was like the closer to money, the closer to God type of attitude. And it was very much like God wants you to be rich, God wants you to succeed. And it was very positive thinking kind of stuff. But what I think a lot of people who don't actually read that literature assume is that it's just about thinking positive vibes. But a lot of, I'm sure you've read like some of the New Thought books, like Think and Grow Rich. But I think it was Napoleon Hill who wrote that. Like he even has a section of like, go hand out like 100 job applications. Like he's very much like, think it and then also be practical and do that real world stuff, which is interesting because that's also what I tell my magic students to do as well when I teach witchcraft stuff. It's like honestly, same. It's like do a lot of that intention vibe shift work and then do the physical work. So to me, there's like so much between New Thought and witchcraft, but not many people actually drawing that link or writing about it. But for me, it's like 100% there for sure.
Yeah. One, I think, it's like taking Christianity into an esoteric, it's like esoteric Christianity, or like that's how I perceive it. And then so much about, well, when I think of witchcraft, which a lot of my ideas about witchcraft have been informed by you, I
Thank
found,
you.
found Witchbody to be such a good book because I had been interested in witchcraft as a young child in rural Appalachia, and I would get these like witchcraft books from the library on like Wiccan traditions or like historical accounts of like Salem and witchcraft and which was like witch hunts. I was interested. I was very interested as a child because Christianity was being shoved down my throat and I wanted to reject it, but I was still drawn to like magical nature and I spent a lot of time in nature
Mhm.
have like a magical world. I was very into fantasy and like I was very interested in this witchcraft and then I kind of lost that whole feeling and in my time in my decade in Africa basically I started to have some pretty negative associations with witchcraft because there were so
For sure.
a lot of the witch doctors were just scammers. They were
Yep.
just people. Um, and then when I discovered your book, I guess maybe like 5 years ago now, 4 years ago, it re triggered. like all that childhood interest in witchcraft and
Yeah.
like connecting with the nature around you as like energetic objects and the animism.
Yeah.
I also love that you're focused on like urban witchcraft.
Absolutely. And honestly, I do think there is a witchcraft that can rise up from any land, any location. Like I actually have a book on my shelf. This is an older book, but it's on like Ozark folk magic. It's like there's a lot of magic around like the Appalachia region. Like there is a lot of more like folk folksy, down to the ground type of magic that is not like the grimoire tradition of magic, which would be like the book magic, like the high magic. That would be more like Golden Dawn type of stuff. It would be more like folk magic, like root type of stuff. So
Yeah,
there is that lineage too in the area that you grew up for sure.
I call it farm magic because
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
the women out there are like growing stuff in their gardens. They have big gardens, they have orchards, some of them. And they're, the use of medicinal plants when I was growing up was still totally a thing.
Absolutely.
Even
And
there's so many Irish people also that into that area that I feel like there's still, you still see shrines in the woods that are almost like Irish fairy shrines
yeah,
that some witchy lady has gone in the woods and like left for others to find. I mean, I think it's changing now because they're developing. There's like more housing developments. There's still lots of land and lots of forests, but it's slowly like creeping into modernity there.
yeah.
But yeah, definitely Appalachian witchcraft is something I hope to learn more about at like the
It's
of
it's
that.
a thing. It's totally a thing. It's totally a thing. And I think also something a lot of people forget is dual faith practice, like Christianity plus witchcraft, has
Mm.
been a thing for a really, really long time. Like I always tell people, one of the coolest witchy stores I ever been to was a um, Greek Orthodox like candle store in Chicago, and they would like bless the candles every morning. There was statues everywhere. There was holy water everywhere. There was like any magical tool you would really need or want, and it was like this massive candle emporium. And would they have called themselves witches? Probably not, but like to me it's kind of like same, really. They're using some of the same tools I'm working with as well, like the candles, the incense, the different plant material suspended in water or oil. Like they're working with a lot of the same things that anyone would find in a Wicca 101 book or whatever, but they're calling it prayer, they're calling it worship, they're calling it something else. But to me it's like same, like more or less. It works in a very similar way mechanically, in my opinion. So it's always fun. I think we have more in common among different magical practices or spiritual practices than we have that's separate in terms of anyone who does prayer-based or intention-based work.
Right, because prayer is so much like calling in I pray for stuff even though I don't consider myself particularly religious.
Mm,
It's just like a form of manifestation,
absolutely.
priming your mind to be focused on one thing, on a goal or
Absolutely.
desire to bring into your life. Like it's just like you said, it's like a form of changing consciousness or
Absolutely.
impacting.
Well, absolutely. And I think there's a clarity element to that too, right? And I think that's part of what I love about witchcraft is it does, if you do it properly, it forces you to have clarity on like who am I? What do I want? What am I going to do about it? which
Right.
which is slightly what distinguishes it from prayer, because prayer there isn't always an answer to what am I going to do about it other than pray. Like sometimes there is, depends on who's doing it.
Send me
Like,
the
make it happen please. Like that's interesting, that's a technique for sure, but with witchcraft and magic there is often like okay, there's we're going to get the ball rolling and then we're going to make a battle plan and we're going to attack the problem spiritually and physically, which
right.
is interesting.
Because can you think of a spell as a plan?
Can I think of one?
like a
Like an example?
spell a plan, or is a spell more like a conjuring?
I think it depends. I think it depends. So, for instance, like there's so many spell books on the market, right? And it's like recipes. It's
Yeah.
like follow these instructions, do this, then do that. But all the rituals that I do, it's very intuitive. And so like I don't really write anything down. Like I'm not following any recipes. Like it comes like up from below, so to speak, and it's kind of like being possessed by an energy in a way, like not in a bad way, but you're just kind of moved by something. Like if anyone has read Garcia Lorca's piece on Duende, it's like very much like that. And if anyone hasn't read it, I'd recommend like read it. But he basically is talking about his dance and flamenco, I think, if I can remember right. And this idea of the dancers kind of being possessed by the spirit of the dance and just God and inspiration and whatever you want to call it. And when I read that, what I saw in that piece was magic, and what I saw in that piece was art and creativity in general. And so for me, art making and writing and all of that is a very similar experience to being possessed by the urge to do ritual and to connect with the universe in a spiritual way. So whatever I do is often very spur of the moment, very kind of intense with no real plan, but it's like everything is super intentional as I'm doing it. But I don't know what I'm going to say out loud during ritual until I say it. So there's very much a kind of like channeled element to it for me specifically, but there are going to be some people who have like their holy binder of like of binder of shadows or whatever. I'm sure people have heard the Book of Shadows. It's like where all the witches' rituals live. But now that we're in modern times, it's often like a printed out binder, like 3-ring binder, where people will look up their rituals. But for me, that methodology has never resonated because it doesn't feel alive to me, but I also don't really cook with recipes very often either. So it's one of those things. Like some people are going to love the structure, and other people are going to be feeling kind of oppressed by it. And I'm definitely in the latter category, but there are for sure people who are going to practice with a more intense, like ritual plan type of thing.
Well, I think you have some, don't you have, if I recall, don't you have some suggested rituals in cure, in curse and
I
cure?
do. I do. And that is mostly to give people a good idea on what can be done, and here is how you could structure something if you wanted to. Because I do think often beginners especially are going to benefit from some kind of ritual outline of someone spelling things out. Like it's kind of one of those things where sometimes I forget like what beginners don't know. I'm like, oh yeah, people are going to need that kind of hand holding at the start, and that's completely okay. And so, yeah, I do have some examples of rituals in that book, just for anyone who does need that. But I am always a big proponent of the idea that the best magic comes from deep inside the self. So it's like I could write a ritual for someone, and like I'm happy to do that, and I have done that, and I'm sure I'll do it again. But what I ideally want to teach people to do is to know themselves, know the type of magic that they like, know the type of energy work that they like doing, and giving them the tools and skills, etc., and the understanding of energy work, understanding of magic to be able to create rituals for themselves that are going to be rituals that no one else has ever done. And I think that type of work is always the most powerful.
Because you have to make time for that, and you have to make space in your life for that, and it's very intentional.
Yeah.
And it does seem like your art in particular, because you do the, your written work is so strong, but your graphic work is also so strong with the graphic novels and your drawings and your ink work. It does seem, just from like photos that I've seen in the videos of your work, that like your whole creative, especially the drawing part of your creative work, is very ritualized and like
Mhm.
does
Absolutely.
magical ritual feel. And then I, it seems to really translate into the work. Like you, like my, I think I told you this story. My father, who's an artist as well, picked up your book from like my railing, and he goes, "Whoever made this was a genius." And he, you know, he doesn't say this about anything. He said that in like a 1 second. Like he
I
was
love that.
feel everything, all the artistic power that went into. I'm talking about her book Witchbody. Like he's like, I feel all the artistic power that went into this, and it's like it was like a communication
It's a transmission.
from one artist to another artist in a flash.
I'm so
And I
touched by that.
think it's, a testament to like the ritual practice that you do, because it's a lot of work also.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And it's very taxing on the physical body too. I think a lot of time people don't realize that. It's like my arm like still hurts from like all of the painting I was doing last year. So like that's probably something I should get looked at. But even when I read cards for people, a lot of people will assume like, oh, you must be so exhausted, like hearing everyone's drama. And I'm like, no, I'm great. It's just I'm losing my voice. Like it's always the physical body that gives out for me rather than the mental body, the spiritual body, or anything like that. So it is interesting, but I'm so honored that your dad said that. I want him to like write that on a blurb so I can put it everywhere. Charlotte's dad says I'm a genius. You guys, listen.
Because never said that about me. Trust me. Uh,
It's coming. It's in the mail, I'm sure.
uh, you have nearby? Do you want to like show people what we're talking about? Because
Yes.
I should have grabbed them, but I don't have them nearby.
No, I should have grabbed it too. Hold on. It's just like slightly out of screen. So give me 1 second.
Show people and what we're talking about. That was my dog saying hello. Yeah, Sabrina's books that she's getting, some are more text based and some are more illustration based, because she's also a graphic novelist in addition to a witch, PhD candidate in witchcraft, and also a tarot, a really, I would say, acclaimed tarot reader, um, teacher of the esoteric European traditions, and descendant of the one of the leaders of the spiritualism movement. Is that fair to say, Sabrina?
Yeah, my mom was, God, secretary of the church for a long time.
The spiritualist.
Spiritualist church. Yeah, so I brought my books. And then I have like the art.
Oh my gosh, amazing.
Yeah, in case we wanted to show it. Just in case now it's like all here.
Yeah. Have you talk about your new project too, like the one that you kickstarted? This is the one that others said was the work of true genius.
I'll take it. I'll take it. I don't know how to like flip this in a way that everyone can see.
I just want to give people a sense of the balance of like text and drawing, because it really is a true graphic novel about, I would describe it as a graphic novel about urban witchcraft. I don't know
Yeah,
how you put it.
absolutely. Yeah. Let's see. This is like the front page.
Yeah, and it's just very beautiful. A very beautiful book.
Thank you.
Award-winning graphic novel.
It feels crazy to now have my second graphic novel coming out. I'm sure everyone was like, what was taking you so long? But
A lot of work.
everyone can deal. Like, I honestly, it's taken too long to get out, but I think ultimately everything happens in the time that it needs to. So it's kind of always how I look at things. Like, I really, with how somewhat dark the new book is, I don't think I was really ready to go there.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it's like very much a trauma book.
Which
Like,
ties into
this,
work, witchcraft and trauma.
I say it again?
Which ties into the witchcraft and trauma PhD.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like, I did a little printout just to, like, this one is more memoir-y, more like childhood trauma-ish. Trying to show you guys.
Oh wow.
This is like the sneak peek. I'm not showing you guys very well, but this one is gonna be like twice as long as the other one.
They'll go online and find it. She did a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter, but now people get their print copies of this.
I'll just pull like a random page. So this is all the original art. So this is
Wow.
what the original pages look like. So this is obviously like picking candles from a candle store. So it's
How
very ritual, and it's also this one kind of flashes back between my childhood and then present day. And so there's this kind of like trauma memory stuff going on, like inner child speaking to current self, like type of stuff with like witchcraft and all that stuff thrown into the mix. Like Witchbody wasn't really like it was about me, but it wasn't. Like there wasn't really anything that autobiographical in it other than the depiction of the rituals that I was doing. Like all of that is rituals that I've done. But this one is a lot more, I don't want to say confessional because that doesn't sound quite right, but it is more like
Per-
memoir, speaking from experience, speaking from like oftentimes like unpleasant experience, and illustrating in many cases like the ways that my spiritual experiences as a child kind of saved me from a lot of the shit I was going through. So, for example,
And do you go into like rituals that benefited your own trauma and like helped you heal things?
implicitly,
Okay.
it's not like explicit. Like it's more Witchbody in style than Person Cure. Curse and Cure is more like, here are some rituals to do if you want, and also here's some techniques. And if you want to learn magic, like do this. Whereas Witchbody, just for everyone listening, is a lot more kind of manifesto. It's very stream of consciousness. It's kind of like a long form essay, and it's just kind of like is this like poetic prose type of thing. And so body magic is very much the same thing, which is why the name convention I decided to just do it the same so that everyone would kind of know. Like if they like Witchbody, they'll probably like this. It's kind of the similar type of thing. And then the third book in this series is going to be Magic Something to kind of keep that Witchbody, body magic, and then Magic Something to be like this group of three graphic novels kind of about witchcraft.
And I read Curse and Cure from cover to cover. Also, I highly recommend it. It's
Thank
a
you.
look at it and you're like, it's a thick one. There's a lot in it, and some of it is practical and some of it is theoretical, which I really liked the balance of the more academic and the more practical aspects of like how would you describe Curse and Cure in like a nutshell?
Yeah. So after I made Witchbody, I had a bunch of people emailing me being like, all right, I'm on board. Witchcraft sounds cool. Now what do I do?
Craft. What does it mean? What is
Yeah,
it?
they're like, I want to witchcraft. How can I witchcraft? And so I was like, okay, clearly I just need to write an instruction manual about how to do this. But I wanted it to be non-denominational, which doesn't really exist. Like to my awareness, this is like the first how-to kind of witchcraft. I call it a 101 because for me it's a 101, but I've heard a lot of people call it like a 201 or a 301 or like intermediate advanced level stuff. So it to me this is like this is all the basics, but not everyone receives it that way. Like some people do receive this as like an advanced level text, like fair enough. Um, but my point behind writing this was to answer that question for people as they were emailing me, like in droves, but also just to write the book that I always would have wanted as a 10-year-old witch, even though this is not written with kids in mind, like at all. Like, I don't think there's any adult content in it, but it doesn't dumb down anything. The idea was for it to be non-denominational, very technique based, so that people could apply it to whatever it is that they believe. So if someone's an atheist, they can still get a lot out of this and they'll still learn how to do magic. But if someone's a Christian or someone's a Wiccan, they will still learn like how to do witchcraft from this book. It will not teach about Wicca, but there's a bazillion books about Wicca. But if someone's a Christian or a Buddhist and they want to do magic, it's like, okay, they could take some of what I'm talking about in here in terms of working with different techniques and do something that resonates, that is unique to them. And I really don't think everyone's spirituality needs to be the same. And that's like a big part of my mission is like working with people from different spiritual backgrounds, different spiritual stories, and might be trying to kind of reconcile whatever that is with an interest in witchcraft and magic, which is really common actually for people to be like, I like this whole witchcraft thing, but I don't think I'm a Wiccan. I want to honor, let's say, the Christian background or a Catholic background or a Mormon background or whatever it happens to be, and also do magic. And I'm like, I got you. And so this is very much like technique, but also philosophy. Like there's a section here, I'm just trying to think like what's especially unique about it. Like I do talk about eclecticism, I talk about appreciation and versus appropriation, and I know that's a whole big conversation. Connecting with culture, I talk about how do you work with ancestors if you're adopted. No
Yeah.
one fucking talks about that. Like what if it's complicated, which I think it is for most people. Like most people are not this like pure category of this or that. Like almost all of us, I would say, like are a mishmash of different histories and cultures. And that isn't really talked about in a lot of books about working with ancestors or working with spirits or working with magic or even understanding ourselves spiritually. It's all very kind of binary. And so I do think like my point behind making this was creating something that is a bit more expansive.
Yeah, when so many people are immigrants and like second culture, third culture kids, so disconnected from, I say it only takes like two generations to completely disconnect from your culture, from like your ancestors.
Yeah,
You know, it goes away really fast when you're immigrating or moving to different places, as like so many people have now in our modern world.
yeah,
Uh, you know, my parents were both like, I both sides of my family were immigrants to America, and so it's like I'm completely disconnected from those ancestors in like two generations.
yeah.
You know,
What countries were they from?
Lebanon and Austria.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That's so cool. And like both of those places have such a rich history. Like pretty much everywhere in the world has such a rich, interesting history. Like there
one
is no like boring place, really.
is like my mom's side fled the Holocaust. My dad's side fled the Civil War in Lebanon.
Yeah,
But I think so many people are, you know, displaced from their ancestors, don't know where they really were. And so I really appreciated that part of the book too, because at some point you're so just kind of have to like form a new tradition where you are,
absolutely.
call in those people to come to where you are at now. Because,
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, I'm so disconnected, so why bother? And
yeah.
I'm like, no.
Or
Like
that European heritage is no heritage.
which doesn't make any sense to me, like at all. And that's a whole other topic I'm sure we could rant about for like
Or
hours.
heritage is no heritage.
What's that?
Or they think American culture, American heritage is like no heritage.
Which also doesn't make sense.
Not from India, so I have like no rich tradition, or I'm not from, you know, XYZ place. So I have like, but you know, Europe has its own esoteric traditions.
Absolutely.
Like, so it's, you know, we don't have
Absolutely.
having some kind of invisible spiritual culture.
It's super interesting. Like I went to the death exhibit at the ROM sometime last year and I was a little bit perturbed by it because there was no European like stuff in it. It was all about mostly Latin American cultures, thoughts on death spiritually, and then a little bit in India, I think a little bit in the Middle East, but it's like I think there was one thing from France, and that was it. But it's like European death culture has existed as well. Like, I mean, like the Catholic relics, and I think someone is becoming canonized soon too, and like that young boy's body has been. Have you heard about this?
Oh,
There's like a new like young boy who's I think becoming a saint. Don't quote me on this. But it's I do follow interestingly, even though I'm not Catholic or Christian at all, I do follow some Catholic accounts on Instagram because I find the material culture of their religion so interesting. And so they are talking about this and with the Pope dying. It's like there is a rich history of death culture and honoring the dead in a lot of, and the entire world has this. And so it is very interesting that one of the biggest museums in Canada leaves all of Europe out of their exhibition about death rituals. I found that very interesting, like nonsensical, really. It's like we all have that. There is spiritual traditions about this worldwide.
I was going to ask you about the Pope's death actually, and if that had any relevance to you, because I do know that you have a relationship to saints in some way.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm aware of it. I haven't given it a ton of thought. That's something I probably will do as the think pieces and everything start to emerge over the coming days and weeks. But how about you? Like, is that something that you're thinking about much at all? No. I
Well,
just, not
not
really. Eh?
like I find it interesting how devoted people are to these human figures, these
Hmm.
and leadership figures like the royal family, the Pope, um, soccer stars,
Yeah.
Kardashian. I
It
put them
is.
in category like
Yeah.
what is his name? Messi. Like
Yeah, yeah.
these I do find like the fandom around powerful human figures that we've chosen as these archetypal Donald Trump. Like I'm interested in the devotion that people practice, which
Yeah.
does type of worship to me. So I'm interested in it from that
Yeah,
perspective, like the
totally.
open, but I didn't feel any sense of like spiritual loss, just like when you got
Yeah.
interested in how, people were having, you know,
Yeah.
strong collective grief, but I didn't feel that I was part of that collective.
I get that. I didn't feel like I was part of the collective either. And I get what you're saying in terms of that kind of devotional aspect.
And I guess
And
I'm terrible to put Kim Kardashian and the Pope in the same sentence. So if I've offended you, bye.
it doesn't bother me, to be honest. I feel like if people are here, they're probably not bothered by that, hopefully. Um, but I do think that concept of devotion is really interesting. And I guess if we really thought about it, like Instagram or social media, it could be a little bit of a digital altar
Yeah.
to these people. It's like a shrine, kind of. And like there are fan accounts on social. So it's like people are making these like fan account shrines of like Kim or whoever, which is interesting as these like objects of devotion. But if we're going to talk about it magically, I think one of the
Like candles with
and
their
candles, yeah, for sure. And if we're going to talk about it magically, one of the things that's really interesting is in Western magic, there's this idea that if you put all of your energy towards something, like an object, a place, or even just somewhere next to you, that you can create kind of a thought form.
okay.
Some people call this like an egregore. And so I do think that one of the reasons that Christianity is so powerful and so long standing is because so many people are putting their energy and their belief and their devotion into it. And even though I'm not Christian, whenever I've visited Europe and especially Paris and been into these old churches that are like a bazillion years old, like if you're sensitive to energy and vibes, like you can't help but feel completely overwhelmed. And I will say till the cows come home, like going into a Christian church in France, the vibes are much more profound than your average witchcraft store. Like
Yeah.
let's be real. Like they're doing some very real energy work in these places, whether you're a Christian or not, I don't think is super relevant. They're doing something significant energetically. If we want to call that magic, sure, personally, I likely would. And so I think all of this energy going towards it and this belief and this devotion to that, I think is why Christianity has lasted for so long and why it actually is. There's an uptick now. I think there's a swing back up. People are becoming more attracted to Christianity in the West again, I think, which is really interesting.
I mean, I was reading a Jules Evans article just last week about the mega churches, or like a mega church that's popping up in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and all these tech people joining this like Christian church and having these like big kind of productions at the church. And it's just like, I don't think that would have been going on 10 years ago at all.
Mm-hmm. It's
Um,
super interesting. Like even in the witchcraft space, like a lot of the big like witchcraft influencers have kind of gone Christian over the past few years, which is interesting.
yeah. And then, of course, like the right kind of manosphere, Russell Brand, like I think that's also driving people in that direction. And it's not even it's like a new thought Christianity, because they're not reading the Bible. They're not like doing any sort of stuff. They're just like kind of latching on to like Jesus Christ. very like Jesus Christ, Jesus plus nothing kind of.
Yeah.
That's what I get from it. Like, which is also again like an avatar, like the Pope, like this like central figure that they can be a stand for,
Yeah.
versus like any kind of broader
Yes.
the religion.
Absolutely. And I think what's interesting about Christianity too, and like if we're going to bring the Pope into it, it's like one of the reasons. Oh no,
Yeah.
your audio cut out. Can you say that
Oh,
again?
I was just saying it's like 100% New Testament.
And you would know because you've been reading the Bible, but I have not read the Bible. So what's the haps in the New Testament?
New Testament is just all Jesus. Old Testament is no Jesus.
Okay, got you. More people should know this. Like I should know that. We should all know that. It's like it's so foundational.
I see Ann Goltz has joined us. She used to be a preacher. She's an author who's like writing about her past life as a preacher and has a Substack. But I'm like, she would know better. I'm not a Bible expert by any means.
Neither am I by any stretch of the imagination. But if we're going to talk about the Pope for 2 seconds, one of the things that's interesting about that, and why, even though I love all the candles and the ritual, I don't think I would be a Catholic if I was a Christian because they have the Pope as the intermediary. And I always tell people like direct contact is the way to go. And so if I was a Christian, I would for sure be one of those like crazy direct contact people. Like I would for sure be more like on the evangelical side where it's like God is speaking through me, what's up? Like that would be more my scene if I was Christian, which I'm not. But I do think that it is important to teach people how to have a direct spiritual experience rather than to locate the spiritual always in someone else. Because people are so eager to give up their own sense of authority and their own sense of agency and to just put that in a figurehead. And it becomes a stand in for the parent, in my opinion. And so if we're going to reparent ourselves and become our own loving parent, we can also be our own spiritual authority in a way and have that direct contact with whatever we believe, right? God, spirits, saints, the ancestors, the land, like whatever way we want to talk about that is going to be different for everybody. But I think that direct experience of spirituality is something that anyone can access.
And I kind of think that this like, you know, rise kind of towards, or this like, fascination that people are having, like this increase in fascination with Christianity and Catholicism.
Yeah.
I'm like, is it a recession thing? Is it because we're moving towards AI and people want like spirituality in like contrast to this machine world that we've created? Is it like a reaction to Me Too and feminism?
Mm.
You know,
It's interesting because I think we were in this era of, oh, I'm spiritual but not religious. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I like spirituality, but I don't like rules or authority. And I think right now we're in an era where people are craving authority. And so I think some people are going to go to, let's say, Catholicism to find that, or another organized religion, or they're going to go to like extremism, like you see all the Western liberal kids defecting to ISIS or like whatever other crazy extremist things, like all the crazy Antifa people in the streets right now. Like it is like a rigid, structured ideology, whether it is the ISIS defectors or if it's the Antifa kids, like whichever way it's going to be, or if it's this kind of rise of Catholicism and specifically like organized religion. It's like people are like really craving order right now, I feel.
well, yeah, you have like Andrew Tate who's like, I'm a Muslim, and you're like, what is happening right now? And people are like, oh yeah, I'll be a Muslim because Andrew Tate is a Muslim, and it's like,
Oh man. Did you
so
know that like a lot of those like, and if anyone who's listened to this is like on the left, I'm sorry, but like there's a lot of these like crazy lefty rainbow flag kids who are like gays for Palestine and they're all becoming Muslim. Like I've seen them all over Reddit. It's the most insane thing. And it's like all these kind of like trans non-binary white liberal university kids wearing like full on Muslim garb. And it's so bonkers to me that this is happening. But I think it for sure is happening. And the fact that it's happening, I think, is a bit of a canary in the coal mine around like what are people craving right now. And I think it is like structure and order.
Not
And
just that, patriarchal order, because
Mhm.
they're out there worshiping some kind of like feminine led anything,
Yep, absolutely.
like craving for patriarchal order.
Yeah.
And
I think you're right. And it's interesting. It's like witchcraft has in since like, I don't know, 60s has been more goddessy.
hmm,
And I think that form of witchcraft is really not having a moment right now. Like it was having a moment in like the 2010s. It was having a moment, but it's definitely not having a moment now. Like witchcraft is not as sexy as it was, which
there's
is
no
interesting. What's
Lilith.
that?
Lilith Fair isn't happening anymore.
Yeah, so it is interesting to watch like the pendulum kind of like change. So, like there are these eras of just like unstructured freedom, like the hippies in the 60s and like the drugs and the free love and all of that. And then there is kind of always that pendulum swing, like the reaction against, and there often is this kind of overcorrection. And so I'm curious what's going to happen. I don't know. But it is interesting to see that manifest also in kind of spiritual trends.
Yeah, and yeah, I do think it's. I do think as the world just becomes so much more technology focused, machine oriented, um, digital, and people are not in nature as much. They're like very disconnected from nature. Then they start craving some kind of connection to the
Mhm.
spiritual realm because they're so connected to the algorithms.
Yeah.
They're not connected to any kind of higher power besides like an advertising machine designed by Mark Zuckerberg.
Absolutely.
And you have people doing massive prayer groups to Donald Trump.
Oh, is that a thing?
Oh,
Like, of course it's a thing. I just haven't heard about it.
I have two aunts that are like members that during the election they were doing like massive collective group prayers to get Donald Trump elected. And I was like, no wonder this man is like escaping death and having so much power when there's like a zillion housewives around America getting together and praying for him every day.
You know what? Like, it's an unpopular opinion, but like, I do think a lot of that is why he didn't die. Like, I mean, come on. Like, that was an insane day. Like, that was insane. And I hate to say it, but like that day really did make me look at him a little bit differently of like, okay, there is something spiritual going on here. And I think it would be really difficult to deny that. Like, love him or hate him, there is something interesting going on energetically that this man is like so divinely either divinely protected or protected by all the prayers of the soccer moms or like whoever it is in middle America. Like there is something interesting about all of that intention. If we're going to speak about it magically, like I know people like to take a shit on thoughts and prayers, oh, that doesn't do anything. But if you have a lot of people who do believe, like that is creating something in witchcraft that we would call like an egregore or a thought form that is actually creating a protective force field around him. Like that is how witchcraft works. And if enough people have that same exact intention in an incredibly populated country where a lot of people take their prayer very seriously, it's not flippant. Like it would not surprise me if that all the vibes did have a very serious effect.
Well, and some would say it's not divine, it's demonic, and that, you know, these people are being controlled by Satan, and that Trump is like harnessing the power of Satan or harnessing the power of a demon. I mean, there's a whole thing people are saying now that Elon Musk has been doing ketamine, and so the ketamine has disassociated him and open. This is what I hear people say: has opened him up to like the demonic fields, has made him so open that the demons can enter. Like people talk like this, and
Hmm.
like him and Trump are just like so open to the demon realm that they're being like possessed and guided by, demonic egregores, demons, like Satan. Like this is also a narrative that I hear. The other
That's interesting. So who is saying that narrative though? Because like, is it just like a different type of Christian? Like, who is telling that story?
So, like, okay, so with this past election and with like COVID in particular, I feel like the entire New Age, if I was going to use the term New Age or like mystic, Burning Man,
Yeah.
like that whole the yoga people of America,
Yeah.
the festival, the spiritual people of America got divided into two groups. There
Right.
was, you know, the New Age Maga group that like the RFK people, they're like, we want like they were into Trump, they were into like anti-vax, they didn't want to be controlled, they want to be free, so they went with the MAGA like freedom of speech. They went with the MAGA people, and then there was a whole other half of the New Age group, like mostly like New Yorkers, Californians, like much more left wing, and those New Age people are now in the Trump is possessed by demons. Elon Musk is demons through ketamine use. Psychedelic practitioners have so many people are doing psychedelics now that demons have entered the consciousness of all the people that were New Age that are now into MAGA. Just got like too many demons in them from opening their minds with psychedelics, and now they're like propelling like the demon takeover of America, and that like we're gonna generate like a demonic force with AI, and the tech people are like, have been like demonically possessed by like a basilisk or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it's like the left wing New Age people. There was a division there that happened during COVID, I think,
Yeah.
around like mandatory vaccines that just like split people into two. I don't identify with either of those two camps completely because I think they're both kind of crazy. Like they're both really fanatical.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think the people that think Elon Musk has like possessed by a demon from doing ketamine, that does sound more like batshit crazy to me than Trump was protected by a lot of prayer. Like they're both like kind of wild. Like and it's
Yeah.
wild having these conversations. I've seen this discussed in very mainstream publications like The Atlantic. So it's not like fringe thought.
Wait, so the Atlantic is kind of saying like making that argument?
Yeah.
That's fucking crazy. Send me that because I want to read it. That's insane. So, on one hand, so okay, obviously I think those people are fucking insane, but I will break down what I think maybe they're trying to get at without really knowing that they're trying to get at it. So,
Wait, too. I'm like, okay, it's either Satan or God. Like, come on, people.
people are weird. But what's really interesting, and I'm sure you know this already, but since I've been going to that trauma conference, like a religious event for me for the past like 5 or 6 years, one of the interesting things, obviously, there's always talks about psychedelics and these types of like drugs in trauma therapy, let's say. And so I've been saying this forever, but it was really nice to hear some actual researchers talk about this. And so what they're basically saying is some of these drugs, the potential and like why they have potential and why they're dangerous is because, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, so don't quote me, but they put people back to something what's called a critical period in development. And so that is an actual term, critical period, and it's like I'm not even going to give examples of when those would be, but we can think maybe like teenagerhood. It's like it could be like this critical period of development or even like being a young baby. It's like certain things that are going to happen that are going to just change your trajectory in life. It's going to rewire your brain. Your brain is especially like malleable and changeable depending on what goes on for you at that point in time. And so these particular drugs can put the brain back into that type of critical period state. And so that is why they have such potential to be used in trauma healing when done properly, because they can put you in a state where working with therapists, you can rewire some of your brain. Awesome. However, the flip side is like if it's not done properly, which is like what's going to happen with most like random kids doing acid at a party, let's just imagine, without any kind of awareness of what they're doing, like that can really fuck people up. And so it is what they're saying, I think, is in some sense true. Like doing drugs indiscriminately, I think can fuck up your brain even if you don't want it to, even if you have good intentions. So I think the drug thing can go either way. Personally, I'm not a drug person myself. I respect everyone's choices. But that being said, like, sure, I could see the argument that that type of experience could make someone psychologically susceptible to some weirdness. And I could see the argument that it would spiritually make someone susceptible to some weirdness because they're a little bit vulnerable.
Hmm.
I get that. Like from a spiritual argument point, I get that. Um, is it that deep? Like, I don't know. Like, probably not. Like, is there demons around Elon Musk? Is he possessed by a demon? Like, I don't personally think so. I think he's just doing his thing, and that's just him doing his thing. And he's a bit of a weird guy, and that's kind of what I can see from it. If I would actually love to do a spiritual consultation with Elon Musk and just like check out the vibe, because then I could find out the answer. But I would have to talk to him to do that, and I would have to like check out his spirits to do that. And this is the thing, it's like I don't really believe in doing that without someone's like consent and awareness. But I don't think those people are right though. I get what they're getting at, like I understand the logic, but I don't agree
I'd
that
love to
that's what's going on.
do a tarot reading for Elon Musk.
I would love to do that. I should message him on somewhere and be like, "Hello, Elon, I'll give you a tarot reading." That would be funny. Um, but I think it's an interesting idea though. Do I think they're right? Like, no. But I do think it is interesting that this is there enough people genuinely think this, that it is being covered in the Atlantic of all places, which used to be a somewhat respectable publication. Like, is it completely gone crazy now?
No, I mean, I think they're just documenting like cultural moods,
Yeah.
have to, touch on these ideas that are becoming more prevalent. And
I'd be curious, like, what type of Christianity those like yoga demon people like mostly are at.
I don't even think they identify necessarily as Christian.
But like who else is talking about demons? Like isn't that a specifically like Abrahamic concept? Because like we see demons in Islam and I don't know if demons are in Judaism, but demons are in Christianity. But I don't really know. Like I'm sure there's like nasty spirits in other religions, but I don't think like the demon specifically
I
I think
think,
is quite Abrahamic.
yeah, but I think it's also just, you know, like a far out kind of idea that people might believe in, like the way somebody might believe in like witches, or
Yeah.
it's just like there's the infusion of fantasy culture.
Yeah.
Um, you know, fantasy as a genre has really grown in
Mm,
our lifetime, and so many people have consumed fantasy, like fantasy literature, fantasy films. That fantasy itself has a role to play in like people's spiritualities, like
mm.
fairies, or believing that there used to be dragons on Earth, believing that there's other realms. These are all things that people in like New Age communities are just much more open to
Mm.
believing, including demons. I think is how I would sum that up.
I think what I'm also curious about is like the rise of paranoia
Yeah,
as a mass thing. Like I think we saw that during COVID, like everyone was paranoid, even the reasonable people were paranoid. And I think like a spiritual paranoia is really interesting. And like this skepticism and like a lack of belief in really most things, I think is really interesting. Like I remember even not to get into COVID, but like I remember when the COVID numbers came out here, I was talking to someone and she was like, "Oh, the government fabricates all of the blah blah blah." Like she went on this little ramble, and she was definitely one of those like yoga MAGA, but not MAGA people. You know what I mean? Like the QAnon yoga people who are like, "There's fluoride in the water," like those people, like the Do you know what I mean? Like that subset of people who are like the chemtrails, like all of that. Like there is this kind of spiritualized paranoia
Yeah.
that is really interesting. And like I'm not 100% sure what to make of it, but I feel like it must be really emotionally and mentally exhausting to live in that way, like where you really don't trust anyone or anything, or likely even yourself.
Oh, and I think so many people now are living in a lot of fear because I talk to people on like both sides of the aisle because I have very liberal relatives and very conservative relatives on different sides of my family. And like some of them are living in so much fear, but it's like they fear the opposite things. Like,
Mm,
you know, one side is like living in fear that they're going to be like picked up by ICE agents and like taken to a El Salvadorian prison. And I'm like, why would you, a white middle school teacher, be picked up by ICE? Like, I'm confused. But, and then the other ones are like, oh my gosh, we have to fight the global order that's trying to like let China take control of America. And like they all have these different fears, but they're all very extreme fears
mhm.
that are causing people to actually modify their day-to-day lives.
Yeah,
And they're all based on just like news stories that are pretty unrelated to the people's actual life.
yeah. I feel like
A lot of news anxiety that people have. And I guess like also in those kind of times of uncertainty where you feel such a lack of control, then maybe it's like, oh, I feel so out of control, it's I may as well blame a demon on it because I have no control over it, just like I would have no control over a demon.
mm,
That's also like a lack of agency feeling, I think.
absolutely. I feel like the fear thing is probably a way to cope with feeling out of control. But what's interesting, have you read that book? Gavin DeBecker, I think he wrote it, The Gift of Fear.
I haven't read it yet.
Oh my God, you need to read it. It's so good. And so one of the things he actually talks about in the book is like when people say fear, they mostly don't actually mean fear. They mostly mean worry, or they mostly mean anxiety. And he talks about fear as this like primal thing. It's like an adrenaline thing. So like I might say like off the cuff, like, oh, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, just like in this conversation, let's say. But if I really think about it, it's like I've only really been afraid, like once. Like when I actually thought my life was in danger.
Right.
And that was like in Paris. Like I don't want to get into it, but it's like it was a whole like horrifying story. But it's like I had this like sense immediately that something was very different than usual and something was very wrong and I was very seriously in danger. And so the way that I conducted myself in that situation, it was like so calm, so calculated. But it's like once it was done and I was safe, I was like shaking. Like, and it was very, very different than what I might just say, like, oh, I'm afraid to like walk down the street at night, which I'm not. But like people say this kind of thing all the time. And so he kind of calls it out in his book. He's like, that's not actually fear. Like, what that actually is just worry or it's just anxiety. Like, fear is like a full body, biological animal instinct thing. And like, you want to hope that your body is going to react properly when you're actually in that type of state. And so, one of the things he argues in the book, too, is like, all of this anxiety and worry actually makes us less capable in those moments of true fear. Because if we're on high alert all the time, like we can't really discern, or it's harder to discern, like what's an actual threat and what's not. And then when we do encounter an actual threat, we're not as ready for it because we're always kind of tense. So he made quite an interesting argument. Like that book really changed a lot for me in terms of how I think about fear and anxiety and like how it's so important to make that distinction between the two is like is it really that gut level animal fear? It's
Yeah.
really interesting stuff. And like I don't know exactly how that fits in, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like these people they think they're afraid, but like they're not really. It's just an anxiety. They're
When it
not. Yeah, go ahead.
gotta not only it's got to not only lower their ability to deal with real fear, it's got to be lowering their ability to just manage day-to-day life because it's occupying so much
Yeah.
real estate in the brain with negative thoughts and anxieties. And that takes us kind of back to that new thought movement.
Yeah,
And I think people maybe having more success because they're drenching themselves in positive thinking and utopian thinking versus anxiety ridden thoughts.
absolutely. And I know, like, I actually used to be quite a negative person and just focus on all the bad stuff all the time. Like, I was always miserable, always depressed. And, like, it took a long time, but, like, I got to a point where I don't do that anymore, like, ever. And it's like an alien form of thought. So, like, it is possible for us to reprogram our brains and just change, like, what are we paying attention to? Like, what are we giving importance? And sometimes I hear people complain about stuff, and I'm like, if that happened to me, I would not even, like, register it for like even a split second. It would just be like, oh, okay, moving on. Like I would not even remember that it happened. And some people just choose these things like hyperfixate, like the drama with their coworker or like whatever, like they slipped on an ice in the winter. Like who cares? Like move on. It's like a lot of people just hyperfixate, but I do think it's a comfortable place for a lot of people to hyperfixate in the misery. And I do think misery loves company. And I do think a lot of people only know how to create intimacy with other people through shared like commiseration and miserable topics.
Yeah.
They don't know how to find intimacy with people through positivity or through actual intimacy. It's interesting.
Yeah. I have to fight against that myself. I'm always trying to call in gratitude, call in positivity to really have uh, appreciation for small moments and to kind of let things slide off because I think I am a prone to neuroticism and I am, somewhat disagreeable. So
Why we get along, I'm also disagreeable.
I have to reinforce that by deliberately being like, okay, what am I? Actually, I did it today. I was working out today and I was doing these like lunges back and forth and it was hot and I was like, I hate this. And then I was like, no, I'm so grateful that I can still do this and that my body works this way. And I'm so grateful to be able to be here working out and not like in a hospital bed with cancer.
Exactly.
So I'm always trying to call in that energy. And that is also why I get sometimes so upset about the political division because so many people have such negative thoughts about the future and I'm like, guys, let's all get together and have positive thoughts collectively. Like we need to imagine a positive future and like the version of the future that we want, not the dystopian Black Mirror version of the future that we don't want. Like that's fun for entertainment to, have our thrills on the TV, but like let's not manifest this into real life. Let's have some positive visualizations and like feel grateful for our country. I know it's very different in Canada. It's like less divisive there where you
But
are.
there still is, it still exists a bit. Like it's not the same, obviously. Like our conservatives are different than down south, obviously, but Canada also, I think the Trudeau era was like more woke than the Biden era, and so like we do have like an element of like culture war stuff that you guys don't quite have because a lot of the wokeness was like government funded. We had like government funded wokeness up here, like the free drugs for crackheads and like the Toronto city of Toronto funded like crack pipes with a little logo on it. I actually slipped on one of those a few months ago. Mind blowing. Um, I could get into a whole ramble about that, but I will spare your audience my rant about that. But it is interesting to notice the rise of apocalyptic ideologies, like from kind of the extreme ends of both sides. And I do wish there was more optimism. It's like I feel like a lot of people in North America act like they're living in Afghanistan. It's like, y'all, relax. Like
We had
touch grass. Like you are not in Iran or Afghanistan right now. Like it could be worse. Like can we just appreciate that? And I think a lot of people are, for whatever reason, like very bad at appreciating what they have. It's like there's no gratitude for what exists. And it's like, are things perfect? No, but they're better than a lot of places. And I don't get why people are having trouble with
it's
that. It makes me feel like people haven't traveled.
They haven't. And we also have lifestyle creep collectively as a nation.
Mm,
We're like, oh, we have it this good, we want it better.
mm-hmm.
We're, we've got this, we want more of the more of free of this. Like it's
Mm.
it's the collective lifestyle creep.
What do you think is the biggest lifestyle creep in the States that people are kind of having a moment about?
Well, free healthcare comes to mind, like, but that's not really the greatest example because we don't have that at all, but people are very fired up that the healthcare is shitty in America. And I'm like, it's probably the best healthcare in the entire world. Like, let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
More people have access to like the best treatments you could possibly get in America, but there's a lot of anger around healthcare, not healthcare being shitty. I'm like, it's actually pretty great here. But of course, there's creep. We want it like even cheaper. We want it even more accessible. We want like everything to work and doctors never to make mistakes. Um, I would say probably just access to like cheap consumer goods is a lifestyle creep, or like fast fashion, maybe. I don't know. What's the biggest lifestyle creep in Canada? I
Hmm.
thought about this, to be honest. It's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. I feel like it's interesting in Canada. I feel like the complaint in Canada, at least before the whole Trump tariff situation, was very much on cost of living and affordability. Like, I think Canada is in a really weird position. It's like we're such an enormous landmass with so much natural resources, and yet it's like undeveloped, and we're having like a housing shortage, and like no one can afford houses really. And so it's this weird situation where a lot of people can't afford things. Like the Canadian economy has really gone in the dumps over the past decade with Trudeau. Like I think under Harper, the Canadian dollar was pretty much at parity with the American dollar. And now it's like, like if I charge $300 Canadian or American for a tarot reading, I get $400 Canadian. Like it's quite a significant difference. And so I'm not complaining because I do business in USD, but for a lot of people, like it is the affordability thing is a massive, massive problem. And I think, and you getting back to the question of creep, like I'm trying to think. Our big problem is that everything that we got used to is now worse than it was objectively because sorry, go ahead.
Infrastructure also.
Exactly. So the infrastructure hasn't kept up with the immigration, and that has nothing to do with like racism. It's literally just math. It's just numbers. Like the federal government didn't think about making sure there was houses and hospitals and schools and all that infrastructure stuff to house and accommodate the amount of people that they let in. And so everyone is kind of feeling the crunch right now. It's just completely unregulated, like massive amounts of people coming in an incredibly short period of time. And so that has meant that a lot of the things that most people got used to they're still available but shittier because like the ER waits are way longer than they've ever been. Like good luck finding a family doctor. Like touch wood, thank God I have one. And I remember even before the immigration crunch, like there was a wait list to get one. So I'm very blessed. But a lot of people who don't have one, it's like good luck with that. Housing shortages, like there's a whole thing. So I think in Canada, it's not the lifestyle creep per se. It's what we used to have, we now don't have. And everyone who has a brain is starting to be grumpy about that. And then there's some people who have this, I think what Gad Saad would call suicidal empathy, where they have this empathy for other people to the point of kind of denigrating themselves. And so I can send you this post if you're interested, but for Canadians who want welfare, it's like $700 a month, but it's only if they make $0. So if they make $500, I think they only get $200. But like new refugees, they get like $200 a day,
Oh my gosh.
which is like insane. And like a lot of people don't realize that that is what's happening. So what's happening in Canada, from what I can see, is that the natural born citizen population is really not getting the step up they need. And like who is getting help is like and tons of money and resources is like drug addicts, refugees, like asylum claimants, etc. Oh, hi, Bella. Yeah, but it's just nonsensical. So I think a lot of people who are paying attention are grumpy about that. It's like, why is that happening? I think a lot of people don't realize. But again, I think Gadsad's idea of suicidal empathy can really help explain that. It's like when a lot of us will bring this up, we'll get called like, oh, you're a Nazi. Don't you care about these people? And it's like, yes, but I don't think like handing out free crack pipes and free drugs to people who are in the throes of addiction is gonna, and like giving them supervised places to do that is really going to help anybody. So it does become this suicidal empathy that ends up making everyone's lifestyle quality so much worse. So I think what's been happening over the last 10 years, especially the last 5 years in Canada, is actually a degrading of quality of life, to be honest. And so a lot of us are just like, what the hell? So it's I think a very different situation than what's in the States, interestingly.
I'm very liberal on my feelings about decriminalization and legalization of drugs, but responsible drugs is very different from addiction. And the number one thing that they'll tell you if you go to, an Al-Anon or you don't want to enable family members or loved ones that are addicted. Like, don't
Yep,
enable. And then it makes no sense to me why the government would be enabling addicts when the number one advice family members of addicts is not to enable them. So
absolutely.
hit rock bottom and
Absolutely.
on their own. And so it's like, why would we put in socially funded programs to enable addicts?
It's fucked up. To me, it makes no sense, especially since I need to pay for my EpiPens, which are like life-saving devices. So I think that should be covered by the government. But apparently that's not covered, and yet like the free fucking meth or whatever it is, it's probably not meth. It's like I think it's like painkillers, like fentanyl type of like opiates, I think is what the government is giving people for free. For free. Like, and the other thing with that is like to me there's no dignity in that approach. Like people often will argue, it's they have their liberty, you have to respect like the right to choose of the addict, and you have to respect their adult, decision making capability. But like from my mind, it's like there's nothing dignified about the way the Canadian government has dealt with addiction. It's like, I'm sorry, but like seeing 10 needles in the park and then a bunch of passed out overdosing people in the average city park is like, that's not cute. First of all, it's not safe for anyone. And there's no dignity in it. Like there's no dignity in that for the addict or for anyone else who lives there. So I'm actually very pro like law and order around stuff like that. Cause like I remember growing up in Colorado and it's like I didn't even know what a crack pipe was, and there's a lot of what people are saying now is like, oh, you have to teach the middle schoolers how to administer naloxone. And I'm like, I didn't even know what drugs was when I was in middle school. And like, they shouldn't know. They shouldn't know they should not know what naloxone is in middle school, in my opinion. So it's like, again, the suicidal empathy. Like, I'm really excited for that book to come out so I can just cite it every 5 minutes. So I think it's a useful idea.
Yeah, I'm like, don't criminalize, but don't enable. Like, let's be just kind without enabling.
So I think it
But
is like a coddling, really, and it just decreases quality of life for everybody. Like this is maybe a bit personal, but like I still have nightmares from my old place because like there were drug needles all over the grass, and like I still have nightmares about like stepping on needles, and like I moved like 5 years ago, so like I have like low key PTSD from like living amongst all the drug addicts, and like it's again I wasn't living amongst them, but I lived across the street from like a tent encampment, and it was like
yeah,
interesting, shall we say.
which wasn't there before COVID, and then
Correct.
arose COVID. To be
Yeah.
clear,
Yeah.
you would there had it been there from the beginning. It like emerged in this time of Canadian decline.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It emerged during COVID. Yeah, which is also interesting. Like, did that happen in the States?
Not where I am, but I guess it's been, increasing in areas like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Denver, Colorado, like
Mhm.
areas not where I am in South Florida, because South Florida takes a very law and order approach. You're just going to get sent to jail. basically.
I'm all about that. I
Or
think that's great.
like you'll if you're disturbing the public. If you're not disturbing the public, you'll be kind of left alone to do your own thing. But you're not going to get a heroin slushy, which you can get at like Bloor and Lansdowne in Toronto. They have a heroin place where you can like fill up your methadone slushy in a paper cup.
I did not know that. That's fucked. Really?
I mean, it was also crazy when I was there last time. I saw signs in the Hyde Park neighborhood that said something to the effect of in front of like the big condos in the public housing that was like, we, due to like increased population, we cannot guarantee your child a place in the public school if you move to this neighborhood. We may bus children to other schools in other neighborhoods.
Wow.
The population had like increased so much there, but there, there's people there paying 50% of their income to taxes, and then to pay 50% and be told that your kids can't go to public school is that's when you really need to catch the infrastructure up with the population growth. And I know it's hard to manage cities, and like you think maybe people will move to rural areas, but they don't. They just want to live in the city.
Yep.
And I'm seeing somebody say something about New Orleans.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Bella's in New Orleans. So I think Bella's saying that there wasn't like the rise of tent encampments down there, and that the homeless addict population kind of just stayed the same, it sounds like.
And I don't really know what caused that. It was caused in Toronto because like people didn't want to go to shelters anymore, or shelters closed because of COVID.
Well, it's because the shelters don't allow them to do their drugs.
Right.
And so I think it was like, again, the perfect storm of woke policies. And that is a big part of the reason why I switched my stance. It was seeing it up close and personal, like in 2020, the result of all of these like free drug policies on my neighborhood. It was completely catastrophic. I'd never seen that before, and they call it compassionate, but that was not what I saw. And like the tents would get set on fire, so I'd have to call 911 like every other day, like, hey, the tents are on fire. And they would be like, we know, we're on our way. And so it's yeah, decline, which is why I'm so passionate about this election that's coming up. And that's part of why it does bug me when people are so apathetic about like any of these issues. Like I'm fine people have strong opinions, but let's not be apathetic.
I've definitely personally noticed an increase in like the amount of visibly high methed out, cracked out drug addicts in Toronto, and it is like crazy in certain areas how much it's increased from when I lived there.
Like the volatile, crazy people causing drama as well.
And I know how
Priest.
with like the legalization of weed also, but I don't think it's actually that related. I think it's pretty different. But it was just like, just a much more Vancouver. It's like they saw what Vancouver was doing, and despite also seeing all the problems that Vancouver has, Toronto was just like, we'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
like,
And I think it was like the NDP over in BC, wasn't it? I think they're like the more left policies. And so again, it just goes back to the empathy. It's like wanting to help everyone, but it's also a coddling, enabling type of thing. Whereas I think what really helps people in this situation is something that is a little bit more orderly. And I don't know if you've read the book Bad Therapy
I
by,
have,
oh my God, I think you would find it interesting, by I think Abigail Shriver, something like that. She wrote a book critiquing the trans stuff. I think she wrote Irreversible Damage. I think, which, if I'm remembering right, is about the rise of like young girls who want to transition to boys. And it's like groups of girls, like 10, 20 girls in a class, like will want to do that. So she wrote the book about that. And so this one is about the rise of therapy for youth, like for kids. And one of the things that one of my main takeaways from that book was that this kind of permissive, gentle parenting is creating insane people because the kids have like no boundaries. They become really narcissistic, like they feel like their feelings are the most important thing on the planet. And it all comes back to this kind of like empathetic therapy speak parenting style And so what she kind of argues in the book is like that whole parenting style is complete BS. And I wouldn't really know because I don't have a child myself. I'm sure you have opinions about parenting, but her argument is like children crave some kind of like authority to bounce up against. Like they know that they're a child and they thrive under like a loving structure. And that when you are either too authoritarian, that's not good, but it's also not good to be super like loosey goosey where anything goes and the child becomes the one with the authority.
Yeah, well, and not to mention the fact that, kids have been on pharmaceuticals like never before
She talks
all
about that too, yeah.
their youth, from like giving antidepressants, all the kids on Ritalin, like, we've just been like medicating children like never before. So who knows what that is doing. Plus, the iPad kids,
Yep.
screens. So between like all that screen time and all the medication and, you know, not to sound kooky, but like birth control in the water, because we know that there's like tons of hormones just in the water system.
And the food too. Like
As
if people eat meat, there's like hormones in that as well.
like a chemically, I don't know what all this chemical drenching is doing to everyone. I mean, we're obviously, and yeah, all the therapy talk, and it's so easy for therapists to just straight up brainwash kids. You
And
know,
that's what the book is kind of about, to be honest. It's real I think you should read it. It's interesting. I'd be curious what you would think of it.
I think I heard her do an interview related to the book. I forget on whose platform, but yeah, just so much of the therapy stuff is also just nonsense. But we could probably talk about that like a whole nother time, another weekend. I just saw my phone. I don't know what happened. I started at like 75%. Now my phone's down to 17%. I think this live has drained my battery in a weird way.
17. I think I'm at 27. I think
Yeah,
I was at like 80 before.
drained our juice, but like I don't want to go on and on forever because we're almost 2 hours. But this has been a great talk. We'll have to like do this again and get
I would love that. That'd be fun.
get into the youth, and also yeah, get into the youth. I learned some new Gen Z slang yesterday.
Oh God, what is it?
I'll finish with this because I was like, I'm gonna tell Sabrina about the new Gen Z slang I learned.
Oh
Um,
no.
in an unk. Are you familiar with the?
Uncle. Like, is that uncle?
Yeah, like anybody that's older than you is an unk. And then
Oh,
another one was clocky. So like when you're like totally getting what someone's saying and you're like, yeah, like the way in Mexico people go like this, the Gen Zers are like clocking it, like they got it. I'm
oh my God.
clocking everything you're saying right now, Sabrina. I'm clocking the tea with you.
Oh my God.
Clock the tea again.
That's wild. Are there any other ones?
Chopped means you're ugly.
Chopped.
Dog water means you're just useless. These
Oh
are
wow.
This is all I learned yesterday from the two autistic teens that I hung out with at Barnes and Nobles.
I don't remember when I was that age, like there being these disses.
Well, we,
Like,
we didn't talk.
what's that?
We didn't have TikTok.
Because like I definitely wasn't like cool as a teenager, but like I don't remember like the discourse of like the lexicon of the different types of insults that you could either dish out or receive. Like that wasn't a thing. Was it a thing like when you were a teenager?
I don't think it was like specifically so broad because we didn't have ways to share it. We only had like private jokes like at your school, like
Mm,
this kid as this name, but you
right.
couldn't be like that's a dog water unk because like have like the whole world to like share your private jokes with.
Oh my God. Speaking of teenagers, I know we have to go, but did you see Adolescence on Netflix? I'm curious, what did you
I
think of it?
did watch it. So I was very impressed with the filming style itself, that they had like
Yeah.
filmed one take. But
That was crazy. The long takes were like the cinematography was insane.
I was like, we kept trying to figure out certain moves. I was just like, wow, they really nailed it. And for people that haven't seen it, it's about a middle schooler who murders a girl. But what I found kind of frustrating was how they made the all the police and court stuff seem like it was happening in real time with the one take. But I'm like, in reality, there would be so much waiting. Things move so much slower. Like the police do like not as good a job, aren't as like caring as what the show portrayed. Like I just felt like it was an idealized version of law enforcement,
It's
which,
also the UK though.
and maybe I don't know, but I was just like, this seems like a very idealized view of law enforcement and a very negative view of teenagers.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm, yes, like the kids are not okay, but like I'm not quite sure that I think I'm like, I'm not sure that law enforcement is the one I would idealize compared to the kids. Like,
I don't feel like the law enforcement was idealized. I didn't feel like the kids were like demonized either. I feel like it was pretty even-handed, where it's like the cracks kind of were shown of everybody, and I think that's part of what I found so interesting about it. Because like each like group of people had kind of like an episode where like they were kind of their version of it was kind of the focus, and I liked that it wasn't sensational and like it was very slow burn, like very conversation
I would
driven.
have had it kept going. I was like, we need the trial.
I kind of like that it didn't have that. Like I liked the ending actually.
Yeah. I mean, it was good. Overall, I think it was a good show. Um, very impressive cinematography and definitely thought provoking. And I definitely I mean I definitely can relate to it too because my daughter's high school had such violence and lockdowns all the time. And
When you told me that, my brain exploded. I
oh,
was just like, are you for real? Like I did not realize that it was so much in such a
I,
short period of time.
I took her out of the school. She no longer goes to this school. It was a well rated public school in Florida. She no longer goes there because there was so much teen on teen violence. And then just in February, one of the students stabbed a teacher there. So I'm like, there is like a true violence problem with the youth, and there's like a performative violence thing where like they're filming fights, almost like filming their little fight clubs at the, it's performative violence, so that is very disturbing, and it is like tied into social media. So I definitely got from a parent's perspective like the realism of Instagram tying
Yeah. And
like
like the group chats of the teenagers with all the emojis that have meanings that we don't understand, like all of that stuff. And I think that Netflix series is a really interesting thing to read with the Bad Therapy book, because the Bad Therapy book kind of explains like why are the kids so fucked up and like violent and crazy. And like
yeah.
there's a subchapter in the book called Battered Mommy Syndrome about like
Oh,
kids where, and I've seen people on my Facebook timeline, like women that I know from like spiritual business groups that I've been in over the years who are speaking about this. And like they will post these like Instagrams of them like crying about my son is beating me, blah, blah, blah. And it's so interesting to read about it in that book, like kind of explains like what is with the rise in teen violence and like what is the role of parenting in creating this problem. And it's kind of like the schools are now trying to step in as parents and take over the role of parents, like even with the whole, not to ramble about this, but like even with the whole trans situation, like I think some schools and some like some areas they don't even have to tell the parents, and so
yeah.
it's like there's all these secrets being kept from the parents. So it's like, where is the parents authority and role? Like I think in some cases it seems like it's being completely like taken away, and then the new parent is like the school or the guidance counselor or whatever, and it's causing a thing. Like you would know better than me since you have to see the effect on the other students in the past school, which sounds horrific. But I'm concerned about the future of democracy. This is what's happening.
Not
And
to fact that all the kids are tracking each other. So there's like a very popular app that was designed for parents to track kids, and it turns out that kids like using it on other kids. So all the kids are tracking all their friends' locations, all the locations of everyone in their classes. Then they see that like two kids are out together and they're like, why wasn't I invited to that outing? And they feel bad. Or they are just like, all these kids are here. I know they're there, so maybe I can go and find them really easily. It's like the rise of everybody tracking everybody's location. It's very popular with teenagers now to track each other's locations. You
That's
know,
crazy.
so they're on like, second by second on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, and they're also geo tracking their classmates all the time.
I'm so glad I didn't have that shit when I was a kid. I only got my first smartphone during my master's,
Yeah.
which is like comparatively late. I felt like a Luddite. Like I only got my first iPhone when I was like 21, 22, which is very late. Like, so I didn't even have Instagram or any of that stuff. Everyone else I knew did, but I didn't have any internet on my phone. And that was an intentional thing from my dad, was like, no, which is interesting.
That's probably why you're a grounded, artistic, creative witch now. And
Maybe. Maybe. It is interesting. And you know what? I know we have to go. But I was a university professor for a few years, just because most of the audience listeners, I'm sure, doesn't know that. But I even saw the rise of anti-authority, even in that age group and the university kids. And I'm really glad that I stopped teaching that environment before the rise of like TikTok and people doing like Instagram reels and lives of their teachers. And someone I did my PhD with actually like had a viral TikTok go about of her teaching in front of the class. This student like deliberately took a sleeping bag to the front of the class at the university to like sleep in front of like an auditorium. And so like this clip went viral, obviously, but it's like brings us back to like what is going on? Like I don't know. I'm concerned. I don't want to end on a concerned note, but so
and
much there's so much to say about so many things.
so many things. And we have to end on the optimistic note of connecting with your inner witch and your inner nature in this disconnected time, and connecting with your community, and being a witch alone, but also not alone, never alone. A witch who's never alone because you're connected. There's my hippy dippy closing.
I like it. And so my hippy dippy closing is, yes, we're complaining about all these things that we're noticing about society and things that would be nice to change. But at the end of the day, we can only really control ourselves. And so I think whenever we make ourselves the best we can be, it ripples outward and affects everything positively. And I think if we spend time with people who are doing the same thing, our lives will be better.
Yep.
People who are embracing their agency. And we have so much agency to change who we spend our time with, how we spend our time, etc.
Up yo coven. Embrace.
Exactly.
Okay, Sabrina. Well, this was lovely. I love you, and we will hang out and
I
talk
love you. This was so fun. Yeah, let's do this again. This was a blast. And thank you everyone for watching. This was
yes,
great.
for everyone. Au revoir.